All right, folks. Well, this one's going to be a bit of a long one, I'll be honest with you. All right. We got an 11-minute video that be real with you. I'm pretty much just going to play the whole way through because, like, I think everybody needs to hear exactly what it is needs to be said as far as things are really concerned. So, with that being said, we've had a few conversations on my channel and other people's channels on, kind of running around talking about this progressivism and recognizing what's really going on with it. And I figured, I got a little bit of time. I wanted to stand here and break this down in a proper manner, right? I wanted to stand here and have an opportunity to sit down and really think about shit and put this to you the best way that I know how. So with that being said, I want to start with the question, what is it that we're lied to about on a regular basis, right? What are like just accepted lies, right, that we're told all the time? And, I started off, I was thinking about the Easter Bunny and Tinkerbell or, the Tooth Fairy and, Santa Claus, right? But, I don't think that's really where I need to go. I think what we need to look at is something a little bit different when it comes down to it, right? So, what are we lied to about on a regular basis? How about let's start off with the Salem witch trials, right? We're told that the Salem witch trials are one of the worst thing that's ever happened in American history. But the truth of the matter is that in total, out of the entire witch trials, 20 people died. 20. That's it. There were 20 witches that were burned or hanged, right? And 14 of them were women. 6 of them were dudes. And there was one dude who ended up getting crushed to death because he refused to plead. The second one is something along the lines of the Spanish Inquisition. What I came up with next. Now, we're told that the Spanish Inquisition was this terrible period in European history where, intellectuals were killed, and all this type of shit. But the truth is, over 400 years, there was 3,000 deaths out of the entire Inquisition. And the truth is that the Inquisition was only really about the fact that, they were trying to convert Jews and Muslims to Christianity in Spain during the time directly after and during the Muslim invasions in the Iberian Peninsula. Now, to give that some context, every year America arrests 10 million people. It's just last year, 10 million. 5 years before that, it was 14 million. It's probably going to be much higher this year with the amount of stuff going on. Now, on top of this, we're told that Hitler was the worst person who's ever existed. Right? And Mao and Stalin, right? Mao killed 44 million people in 4 years. Stalin is directly responsible for around 60 million. These are things that we're told about, right? And we're lied to about on a regular basis. It's just lies that we accept, traditions of a lie that we accept all the time, right? It's part of our culture. It's part of our heritage, right? For instance, here's another one. Going to college will get you a better life. Well, the truth is, right here, there are a huge list of billionaires, including Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, the individual who founded Dell, robot Mark Zuckerberg. There's a whole list of individuals who dropped out of college and went and did their own thing. Because the truth of the matter is you're never going to break the mold if you're inside of the mold. That's just the truth. And on the live stream the other night, I brought up, the American Bill of Rights, where he said, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Well, that's just a falsehood, in general. Like, there's men who are better than me. Like, it is what it is. Like, there's men out here who are better men than me. There are men out here who are more important than I am. And I accept that fact. And everybody should. Because, just the truth. Like, the truth is kind of important. But the reasons why I bring up all these things, right, is for you to understand that there's a reason why we're lied to in this manner, right? With the Salem witch trials, and the Inquisitions, right? It's because they want to stand here and destroy fundamentalist Christianity, right? Because ultimately progressivism is just progressive Protestantism. The people fighting it don't know that, but that's really what this is, right? And Mao Zedong and Stalin versus Hitler, right? Hitler was a nationalist. These individuals are communists. There's a big difference between those two. And nationalism don't fit into their globalist propaganda, right? And with the college, academia is part of the cathedral, which you're about to hear all about here in about 2 seconds when I start this video. And I'm going to let you stand here and hear a guy named Charlemagne talk about a dude named Mencius Moldbug and his letter to Hello Good Liberal, I think it's called, or something like that. Enjoy. I'll catch you on the other side and we'll discuss it a little bit.
Today we will review more ideas from Part 9 of Mencius Moldbug's Letter to Open-Minded Progressives, which was published on June 12, 2008. These next 3 videos on Moldbug will all be on Part 9 of the Open Letter, and will be a bit different in style from the previous 6 videos. In the first series of videos, I set about selecting passages from his letter and demonstrating their truthfulness through example. In this series, I will be reading the letter at a greater length to fully articulate his points. Moldbug begins Part 9 by describing how the origins of the progressive versus conservative conflict is to be found in the conflict between progressive Christians and fundamentalist Christians in the early 20th century. Moldbug cites Professor Carlton Hayes' book, A Political and Cultural History of Modern Europe, published in 1916 and updated in 1924, which describes how the original progressives were a Protestant sect in opposition to fundamentalist Christians. I will read his embedded quotation to set the context. Hayes says, quote, "Among Protestant Christian sects, there were several significant movements toward cooperation and even toward formal union. Many barriers between them were broken down, at least in part, by the Young Men's Christian Association, which had been founded in the 19th century, but which expanded very rapidly during and after the Great War. The Salvation Army, dating from about the year 1880, was another factor in the same process. It placed emphasis on spiritual earnestness, on evangelical work among the poor, and on charitable endeavors, rather than on sectarian controversies. There were also various, quote, federations of churches, end quote, and in Canada, after the Great War, several Protestant denominations were actually united. Such interdenominational and unifying movements were made easier by the fact that the original theological differences between the various sects were no longer regarded as very important by a large number of church members. Some Protestants, reacting against the decline of dogma and the doubting of the miraculous and the supernatural, turned increasingly toward Christian Science or towards spiritualism or theosophy. In some countries, and especially in the United States, the current vogue of Darwinism and other theories of evolution caused a new outburst of opposition from stalwart groups of Protestants to the claims of, quote, science, end quote, and a stubborn reaffirmation of their fundamental faith in the literal inspiration of the Bible. These, quote, fundamentalists, end quote, as they were called, were fairly numerous in several Protestant denominations, and they contested with their, quote, progressive, end quote, or, quote, modernist, end quote, brethren, the control of Protestant churches, particularly the Presbyterian, Episcopalian, Baptist, and Methodist, end quote. Now we get to Moldbug. Quote, "Your present-day progressive or modernist may retain some vestigial belief in God, or not, but she certainly does not think of her faction as a Christian supersect. Meanwhile, her fundamentalist adversaries have largely appropriated the label Christian. Neither side sees the red-blue conflict as that old staple of European history, the Christian sectarian war. To our modern fundamentalists, the term has become so opprobrious that they will respond better, dear open-minded progressive, if you use the word traditionalist. The idea that liberalism is actually mainstream Protestant Christianity is about as off the wall as it gets, and it must strike most progressives as equally weird. But here it is in black and white from a legendary Columbia historian. Obviously, someone is off the wall. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's you. Are you feeling paranoid yet, dear reader? When dealing with historical movements, it's often useful to ask, is this dead or alive? If the former, what killed it, when, and how? If you cannot find any answers to these questions, it is a pretty good clue that you're looking at something which isn't dead. And if it's not dead, it must be alive. And if it's alive, but you no longer identify it as a distinct movement, the only possible answer is that it has become so pervasive that you do not distinguish between it and reality itself. In other words, you do not feel you have any serious alternative to supporting the movement, and you are probably right. Note that this is exactly how you, dear open-minded progressive, see the modern children of those stubborn fundamentalists. You read the conflict asymmetrically. You don't think of yourself as someone who believes in progressivism. You don't believe in anything. You are not a follower at all. You are a critical and independent thinker. Rather, it is your fundamentalist enemies, the tribe across the river who are the Jesus-besotted zombie bots." End quote. The line of reasoning that Moldbug is beginning here is essential to his work and neo-reaction. The cathedral is not merely a clever metaphor for progressive institutions. Progressivism is quite literally a religion, its foundational mythology enshrined in the words, quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." End quote. Americans are not taught to examine the Declaration of Independence critically, but mulling over it for mere moments shows that there is nothing self-evident about this at all. In fact, simple observation shows that the opposite is better evidenced. Yet people believe it, because it is part of the American tradition, as Moldbug reminds us. Quote, "The first step toward a historical perspective on the conflict is to acknowledge that both of these traditions are exactly that, traditions. You did not invent progressivism any more than Billy Joe invented fundamentalism. Thanks to Professor Hayes, we know this absolutely, because we know that both of these things existed 84 years ago, and you are not 84. And what is the difference between a mere tradition and an honest-to-God religion? Theology. A mini-God or a three-God or a one-God tradition is a religion. A no-God tradition is... well, there isn't really a word for it, is there? This is a good clue that someone has been tampering with the tools you use to think. Because there must be as many ways to not believe in a god or gods as to believe in them. I am an atheist, you are an atheist, but you are a progressive, and I am not a progressive. If we can have multiple sects of Christianity, why can't we have multiple sects of atheism? Let's rectify this linguistic sabotage by calling a no-god tradition an a-religion. A one-god tradition is a uni-religion. A two-god one is a di-religion. A three-god one is a tri-religion. One with more gods than you can shake a stick at is a poly-religion. And so on. We see instantly that while progressivism, 2008 style, is an a-religion, it does not at all follow that it is the one true a-religion. Oops. Question. In a political conflict between a di-religion and a poly-religion, which side should you support? What about an a-religion versus a tri-religion? Let's assume that, like me, you believe in no gods at all. One easy answer is to say the fewer gods, the better. So we would automatically support the di-religion over the poly-religion, etc. I think the stupidity of this is obvious. We could also say that all traditions which promote gods are false, and therefore we should favor the a-religion over the tri-religion. Unfortunately, even if we assume that the a-religion is right on the deity question, and not even one of the three gods exists, the two could not engage in a political conflict if they did not disagree on many subjects in the temporal plane. Who is more likely to be right on these mundane matters which actually do matter? We have no reason at all to think that just because the a-religion is right about gods, it is right about anything else. And we have no reason at all to think that just because the tri-religion is wrong about gods, it is wrong about anything else. So this is really just as stupid, and I hope you haven't been taken in by it. Lots of smart people believe stupid things. The second step is to acknowledge the possibility that, on any issue, both competing traditions could be peddling misperceptions. In fact, we've just seen it. Neither side wants you to know that progressivism is the historical mainstream of Protestant Christianity. Only in the pages of smelly old books, and of course here at UR, will you find this little tidbit of history. This is pretty standard for religions, which always have a habit of obscuring their own pasts." End quote. Moldbug has opened up novel avenues of thinking for us here. As he points out, we don't have a word for a type of tradition without a god. If there isn't a word for such a simple concept, it should make you worry that the reason for this void could be because someone doesn't want you to be thinking about the idea in the first place. Clearly, there can be religious traditions without a god, ideas with their own theology, sans the personhood of a deity. Moldbug has given us the word "our religion" to describe such a tradition, a type that Americans know very well. As previously mentioned, one is enshrined in the Declaration of Independence. The self-evidenced equality of men is stated as a truth evident in of itself, beyond the necessity of requiring additional proof. This belief is quite Christian, and the fact that modern progressives maintain it despite their atheism is ironic but not surprising. After all, as we know, progressivism was created by Christians from Christian beliefs. The cathedral has concealed this to perfection, and Moldbug next explains to us why this illusion is maintained. Quote, "Why do both sides agree on this misperception? The fundamentalist motivation is obvious. As a traditionalist Christian, you believe in God. It is obvious that anyone who doesn't believe in God cannot possibly be a Christian. The idea that there could be any kind of historical continuity between people believe in God and people who don't believe in God is absurd. It's like saying that Jesus was just some dude. But as someone who doesn't believe in God, you have absolutely no reason to accept this argument. Do you care, dear open-minded progressive, what wacky stuff those wacky fundies believe in? Do you care whether they worship God in one person, God in 3 persons, God in 47 persons, or God in the person of a turtle? No. No. From the progressive side, there is a very different problem. The problem is that if progressivism is indeed a Christian supersect, it is also a criminal conspiracy. Assuming you're an American, dear open-minded progressive, you might have forgotten that it's quite literally illegal for the federal government to, quote, make an establishment of religion, end quote. While its authors and ratifiers never meant the clause to mean what it means today, we do have a living constitution. The law is what it is now, and over the last half-century our friends in high places have been quite enthusiastic about deploying it against their fundamentalist foes. Perhaps some perspective can be obtained by replacing the words modernist and fundamentalist in Professor Hayes' narrative with Sunni and Shia. The First Amendment does not say, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of Shiism." More to the point, it does not say, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion until that religion manages to sneak God under the carpet, at which point go ahead, dudes." Rather, the obvious spirit of the law is that Congress shall be neutral with respect to the theological disputes of its citizens, such as that described by Professor Hayes. Has it been? End quote. If we recall the opening on the first video, I noted that the cathedral became a formal part of the government with the creation of FDR's Brain Trust, a group of priests from America's top churches. Actually, they were professors from America's top universities, but through the optical device of the fundamental lens, we can discern their religious nature. Moldbug introduces this device to help us overcome doubt of the non-neutrality of the government in religious matters. Quote, "If you doubt this, maybe it's time to put on the fundamental lens. This is a cute optical accessory that transforms all things Sunni into things Shia and vice versa. When you're wearing the fundamental lens, progressive institutions look fundamentalist, and fundamentalist institutions look progressive. In the fundamental lens, Harvard and Stanford and Yale are fundamentalist seminaries. It may not be official, but there is no doubt about it at all. They emit Jesus-freak code words, secret Mormon handshakes, and miscellaneous Bible baloney in the way a baby emits fermented milk. Meanwhile, Bob Jones and Oral Roberts and Patrick Henry are diverse, progressive, socially and environmentally conscious centers of learning. Their entire freshman class lines up to sing Imagine every morning. Would it creep you out, dear open-minded progressive, to live in this country? It would certainly creep me out, and I'm not even a progressive, though I was raised as one. An America where every progressive in any position of influence or authority was replaced by an equal and opposite fundamentalist, and vice versa, is one you would have no hesitation in describing as a fundamentalist theocracy, which implies quite inexorably that the America we do live in, the real one, can be fairly described as a progressive atheocracy. That is, a system of government based on an official a-religion, progressivism. This a-religion is maintained and propagated by the decentralized system of quasi-official educational institutions which we, here at UR, have learned to call the cathedral. In this chapter, we'll look, purely in a theoretical manner of course, at what it might take to get rid of this thing. If you find the exercise unpalatable, dear open-minded progressive, just snap the fundamental lens back on and imagine you're trying to free your government from the icy, inexorable grip of Jesus, or the Pope. The resemblance between anti-fundamentalism and its older brother, anti-Catholicism, may be too obvious to mention, but I should mention it anyway. Obviously, I don't object to the cathedral on account of its atheism. If a theist can object to theocracy, an atheist can object to atheocracy. I object to the concept of official thought in general, to the details of progressivism in specific, but most of all to the insidious way in which the cathedral has managed to mutate its way around the, quote, separation of church and state, end quote, in which it so hypocritically indoctrinates its acolytes. The cathedral is the apotheosis of chutzpah. It is always poisoning its parents, then pleading for clemency as an orphan, end quote. The cathedral promulgates an ontological framework with Christian dogma at its core. With the help of the fundamental lens, we can remove the layers of obfuscation that have been carefully erected to direct one's attention away from the altar at the center of the cathedral. With this in mind, in the next video, we will examine more specific examples of how Christian epistemology affects the cathedral, and what conclusions may be drawn from this. Thanks for watching.
So, with that laid down in the manner in which it was, I want you to sit back and think, really actually think, right, about what all that really means. Does it mean that all of the things that you've been taught your entire life, from Jon Stewart to George Carlin, the whole way through Bill Hicks, everything, all of the bullshit you've had put into your head that you saw as freeing and having an opportunity to be an individualist was really, honestly, just a way of indoctrinating you into a fucking religion to make you sell your fucking soul. That's a weird thought to really have. That's something that no one really thinks about, no one really says. But I think we should start. We should start thinking in this manner because it's the truth. It's not because of the fact that, we look now, right? But right now you can see the end result of it. You can see as they try to sell us down the river. You can see as they try to replace us. You can see as they stand here and try and rip what little you have left. As you watch men die and watch your economy wither on the vine and you watch your place in history fade. Do you understand yet why it's so important that you understand that this religion is a religion? And every time you run into it, every time you look at liberalism, you need to understand that this right here is the end result of Protestantism. It is not the end result of Marxism or any type of bullshit postmodernist garbage. It's not. It's been around much longer than you think. Anyway, yo, look, I'm Tom Peace from Pnoid News. I'm going to shut this down because it's been about 23 minutes. It is what it is. All right, you know the deal. Like, share, and subscribe. You know the deal. Always drop good content for you. Peace.